Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk on Friday, February 2nd, Groundhog's Day. And you're listening to another edition of Real Talk on 92.5 WLSD. You can also go to WLSDradio.com. And we're going to dive into a nice little cult classic gem of a movie entitled True Romance. But before we get into that, please go to all of our social media pages. That's the Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, TikTok, and YouTube, The Other People Show. Now, this music, if you've not seen this movie, this music, it kind of puts you in a smiling mood, hopeful, looking forward to the future, quirky. These are a few of the adjectives that would describe the score by Hans Zimmer, the famous composer. And this is a movie that it was pretty much ignored by moviegoers in the theater, but it found its way on home video and HBO, DVD, and now Blu-ray, and it's one of the early works of Mr. Quentin Tarantino. But thank you all every week and throughout the week checking out the show. Much, much appreciated. And go to the sister station over at WAXM and check out their programming, as well as their on-demand section online, The Dark Place. Please go take a gander at those places as well. So, if you haven't heard of True Romance, it is about a pop culture nerd who inadvertently steals some cocaine from his new wife's pimp and tries to sell it to Hollywood, prompting the mobsters who own the drugs to pursue the couple, and hilarity ensues. Now, I don't want to say it's hilarity ensues, but there are a lot of places and a lot of points within the movie that there are chuckles, are smiles, and it's a good time to be had if you like this kind of movie. So let's dive right in. This movie was directed by the very famous Tony Scott. Now, you might not know the name. If you know movies, big blockbuster movies, you probably do know this name. He was the producer of some of the biggest movies up until 2010. Those would include Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop, Revenge, Days of Thunder, The Last Boy Scout, True Romance, Crimson Tide, The Fan, Enemy of the State, Spy Game, Man on Fire, Domino, Deja Vu, The Taking of Film 1, 2, 3, and Unstoppable. He is the producer by some of the biggest hits of the last, I don't want to say some of the biggest hits, but for some very big hit movies that include movies with Eddie Murphy, Tom Cruise, Bruce Willis, Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes, Robert De Niro, Will Smith, Robert Redford, Val Kilmer, John Travolta, and Denzel. So you get the gist here. This is a heavy-hitting director. I said producer a moment ago. A heavy-hitting director that knows his way around action-packed movies. Now, this has a wonderful cast of who's who, not only at this time you have to think, this is going back to 1993. So some of these names weren't huge names at the time. There were names that were known, actors and actresses that were actually known, but a lot of them went on to do a lot of bigger things than this. This was a small movie. This was a Hollywood movie, yes, but it wasn't a huge blockbuster type movie. And we'll talk about that a little later in the show. But the cast includes Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Gary Oldman, Brad Pitt, Christopher Walken, Bronson Pinchot, Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Rappaport, Saul Rubinek, James Gandolfini, Chris Penn, and Tom Sizemore. So if you know anything about movies, you may not know these names. Hopefully you'll know quite a few of these names. But I would guarantee you, if you watch this movie, you would know some of these names. You might not know Chris Penn, the name. It's Sean Penn's brother, but he has been in some other movies. Reservoir Dogs. He's actually in Corky Romano, the Chris Kattan movie, which is, oddly enough, if you've never seen Corky Romano, it's so silly, but it's funny in such a silly way. So if you want a silly kind of movie, check out Corky Romano, a little bit underrated on the silliness comedy level. But this has a cast of well-known people. I mean, Christian Slater was in his mid-20s when he made this. He was coming off cuffs, coming off of a co-starring role in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Later, after this, he would go on to do the Interview with a Vampire, Broken Arrow, Very Bad Things. So Christian Slater was building up to be this big Hollywood star. He had all the talent as a young, and the manic energy as a young Jack Nicholson. He had that same kind of voice, same kind of charisma, and he was a teen star, a late teen star as well. But he was set up as the central point in this madcap of a movie, and it really is. It truly is. You've got Patricia Arquette. Now, I wasn't as familiar with her filmography before this film, but I do know a lot about it afterwards. And she was in movie Stigmata. She's also been in. She had a TV show. I think it was called Medium, that ran for about a decade. And then you've got Dennis Hopper. Now, I almost. And I wrote out an itinerary for Blue Velvet as well. That was almost the movie that we did tonight. Dennis Hopper happens to be in Blue Velvet. He was the deacon in Waterworld. So he plays these, kind of Easy Rider. He was in that movie. So he plays a lot of these larger-than-life characters. But this is a more grounded character, and his scene with Christopher Walken in this movie is one of the best scenes of dialogue between two of these type characters ever on film. You've got Val Kilmer, who actually wanted the lead role, Clarence, but Val Kilmer ended up playing. He's credited as Mentor when he's playing a version of Elvis. Now, Graceland did not sign off on the movie at all. So therefore, when you watch the movie, although there is some Elvis talk within the movie quite a bit, and Clarence is a big Elvis fanatic, he even wears the Elvis, like the 1970s Elvis sunglasses in a lot of the scenes. And Val Kilmer plays this Elvis-like character that Clarence somewhat talks to, or at least in his mind, but he's only named as Mentor because Graceland will not sign off, so therefore the name Elvis could not be used in the movie itself. Gary Oldman said that this was one of his favorite roles that he has ever played. He plays Drexel Spivey, and he's only in the movie probably 7 or 8 minutes. But he's a very memorable character. Some of the wig that he has in this movie he used from Dracula, and he was in Dracula a couple of years earlier. Actually a year earlier. He uses an eyeball from the movie Dracula as well for his character, and he's kind of a pimp within the movie, and he does a lot with those 6 or 7 minutes. and you don't even realize it's Gary Oldman. Also, it's a young Gary Oldman now looking back, obviously. Excuse me. But he's unrecognizable. So he really digs into the character, dives into a character, and he's great to watch in there. You've got Brad Pitt as Floyd. He's Dick Ritchie's roommate, and he's kind of this stoner podhead character who, is calm, and he's kind of seems to be a little bit stoned a lot of the time that he's on screen. Floyd's only in the movie maybe a couple of minutes, but once again, Brad Pitt does steal the scenes that he's in, and he does a great job at that, and it's a very memorable scene as well. So I don't want to go through each and every character, but these characters are memorable characters, and when you see these actors and actresses on screen, you will probably immediately recognize them. So let's get into a few facts about the movie True Romance. This movie was in fact written by Quentin Tarantino. True Romance and Natural Born Killers were formed as somewhat of a long epic. He decided to split them in half, and this was half of the original. It eludes me the name of the movie that it was originally called the screenplay. But this did come from Quentin Tarantino. A side fact of the fact was that Quentin Tarantino had another movie script called Reservoir Dogs, and he almost directed this, and Tony Scott almost directed Reservoir Dogs, whereas Tony Scott really wanted to direct both. But Quentin gave this one up, True Romance, and it helped in a way to finance Reservoir Dogs. And but you can tell from the dialogue and the pop culture references that this is a Quentin Tarantino written film, although it's shot very much like a Tony Scott film. Very much so like one, because it is one. So the scene that I was mentioning earlier, it's a scene with Christopher Walken and as Vincent, and you've got Dennis Hopper as Clifford, Clarence's father, Christian Slater's father. So there's a scene that they have. Clarence came by to ask his father. His father is a cop on the force. Clarence has inadvertently taken this suitcase full of drugs, and then he's asking his father, "Do you still have some friends on the force that can check and see if they know anything about me at all?" His father checks. They know nothing. They think it's drug related, that the pimp met his demise. But these mobsters come along because they find out through investigating that Clarence earlier in the film had left his ID at the bar, at the place that Drexel and him get into a confrontation. So therefore they're on his trail, and they show up at Clifford's house. Trailer, so to speak. I think it is a trailer. It's a single wide trailer. And it's called the Sicilian scene. And there's a back and forth going on, a show and tell, where Clifford is showing Vincent everything that he thinks he wants to know, but he's telling him nothing about where Clarence has gone. But Quentin Tarantino named this scene, the Sicilian scene, as one of his proudest moments. He said, "I had heard the whole speech about Sicilians a long time ago from someone living in my house. One day I was talking with a friend who was Sicilian, and I just started telling him that speech, and I thought, wow, that's a great scene. I have to remember that." So it came from real life dialogue that Quentin had heard, so he decided to use it in the movie. And it was executed magnificently by Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper. So this is the Sicilian scene. You can type it in on YouTube and it'll pop right up. So in the film, Clarence and Alabama, that's Patricia Arquette, drive around somewhat of a purple Cadillac. So director Tony Scott gave Patricia the purple Cadillac as a gift after shooting had wrapped. As the Ford Futura that she was driving at the moment kept on breaking down. And Patricia Arquette recounts this in the 2002 DVD commentary, which happens to be the DVD, the director one that I own. And I purchased in 2004, so that's probably this particular DVD. So, although this movie was not directed by Tarantino himself, it is still considered part of the Tarantino universe. There's a couple of clues as to why this is. The first clue is that Lee Donowitz, the grandson of Sergeant Donnie Donowitz from Inglourious Basterds, was confirmed also by Tarantino. The second piece of evidence is the fact that Mr. White in Reservoir Dogs mentions working with a girl named Alabama. Now, I had thought of that too the first time I'd seen this movie, knowing that I'd seen Reservoir Dogs first, and I kind of made that connection. But I did not know at the time. Maybe I did. I can't recall. I guess I did know that Tarantino had written that. I'm not sure. I can't recall, to be honest with you. But another factoid is, on the first day of shooting, it became clear that Christian Slater and the director, Tony Scott, had different ideas on how to play Clarence. So Tony Scott gave Slater a copy of Taxi Driver and told him to watch it as his homework. And this is a song that's going on when Christian Slater, Clarence is in there with Drexel. This is blasting in the background. So there's a scene later on in the movie where Nikki, who's played by Chris Penn, and Cody, played by Tom Sizemore, interrogates Elliot, who's played by the perfect stranger himself, Bronson Pinchot. And he also plays Serge in Beverly Hills Cop. Serge. But all the lines within the elevator were improvised by the three actors, and they're improvised very, very, very well. It's a really well-crafted scene. So like I said earlier in the show, the budget for this movie wasn't a high-end budget for Hollywood terms, even back in 1993. It had a $13 million budget, and you've got a cast like this. So you know they were all working for probably not a whole lot of money, Hollywood money. You know what I mean? They loved the material. They wanted to, be a part of this wonderful movie, this wonderful script, and these wonderful actors and actresses that they were getting to work with. So they worked for a lower than usual payday. So this was a $13 million movie, which seems like a low gamble. I would think so too. If I was a studio exec, I would actually greenlight this film based upon the information that they would be bringing me. However, it didn't work out that way. This movie was not a financial success upon first release. It only made $12.2 million in the United States, and worldwide a grand total of $13.1 million. Typically, studios get half, so this movie costs $13. You add in advertising, probably another 5 to 10, and it brings in about $6 million. But that's before home video sales, HBO, DVD sales, Blu-ray sales, and name recognition of Quentin Tarantino, one of his first writing assignments but first written screenplays that was made to a movie. He had that one, and Natural Born Killers were the first two. And I do think this is a much, much better movie than Natural Born Killers as well. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the plot and the story of this movie. So the plot and the story, like I said earlier, Clarence is kind of a lonely guy. He's I'm going to go through the synopsis rather quickly, maybe step by step a little bit, so maybe not so quickly. But he goes to the movies every single year and watches 3 kung fu movies on his birthday. His boss knows this, so his boss hires a call girl to go to the movies, flirt with Clarence, and show him a good time. Little does he realize that this is going to lead to an adventure and a love of a lifetime for Clarence and Alabama Worley. They fall in love. She tells Clarence that she's been a call girl for just a couple of days, but she is monogamous and she is in love with him. She says all of her belongings are back at Drexel's. Clarence asks, "What's a Drexel?" "Drexel's my pimp." So Clarence decides to go back, get Alabama's stuff. Drexel and Clarence get into somewhat of an argument, and Clarence ends up shooting and killing Drexel and Drexel's, a couple of his associates. Clarence is yelling, "Put Alabama's stuff in the bag." So the other girls that are there put some stuff into a bag, gives the bag to Clarence, and Clarence leaves. So when Clarence gets back, it is discovered that Clarence has a bag full of drugs. A bag full of drugs. Clarence and Alabama decide to get married, and then they contact their friend Dick Ritchie, who happens to be an actor in LA. So they leave Detroit, go to LA in hopes of Dick Ritchie contacting some of his Hollywood friends to try to unload or sell these drugs that they've come in contact with. And that's where the adventure begins. That's where this cast of character comes from all sides and connects to make a really good, thoughtful, action-packed, well-spoken, interesting movie. Now, I'm not going to go so far out there on a limb and say the movie... there's only one female in the movie. Well, actually, to be honest with you, there are... I think there's 2. There's only 2 females in the movie. And the first female in the movie, bonus points if you watch this film and you can tell me what other movie that you've seen that she's in. Yeah, she's the very beginning, and she's the first person at the bar. She's the patron at the bar that Clarence is originally talking to. And he's talking to her about Elvis. But let's answer some of these questions that we have on the show. So, as I said, we have the characters. This is a who's who of cast of characters in this film. Christian Slater, this is probably the coolest that you will ever see Christian Slater on screen. It probably really is. He's in love, and he's doing things in his life that he may not know that he had inside of himself. He's stepping out in faith of love to try to do the right thing, and that's the basis of the entire movie, that love is not always what you think it's going to be, or the adventures basically that it can get you into. Which is true. Which is extremely true. You got Patricia Arquette. I think this was her best role. Alabama Worley. She's originally Alabama Whitman, but she takes, Clarence's last name. But yeah, I think this is probably the best role that I've seen her in. So top notch from those two. Probably both of those two's top notch roles. You've got Dennis Hopper. He's tremendous. Now, as far as an everyman, this is probably one of his best roles as an everyman. He's playing a psycho in Blue Velvet. He's playing a villain, the Deacon in Waterworld, a little bit over the top. So this is his probably most down-to-earth role that I've seen or can remember just sitting here talking to you all tonight. Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer's only in it briefly, and you never really see his face. But you wouldn't know it's Val Kilmer, I don't think. He does stellar work. There's not anything wrong with his work. He's just not in the movie a lot. But he does a great job. Gary Oldman, you don't know it's him. He disappears within the interior and exterior of Drexel. I mean, if you're going in and you didn't know this was Gary Oldman, you wouldn't know it's Gary Oldman. So, fantastic job. I don't know if I could say this is his best work ever. He's done some stellar work. But for the few minutes he's in on the screen, fantabulous. Fantabulous. You've got Brad Pitt. He does a great job as Floyd. Like I said, he's only on screen 3 or 4 minutes. But those are fantastic minutes and they're fun. They're kind of a light-hearted moments as well. And you get a few chuckles in the movie through this part as well. Christopher Walken, he's only in one scene, the Sicilian scene. And he does an amazing work as well. This was before he started later on becoming more of a parody of himself. So this was when he was more of, quote-unquote, an actor. And he kind of melts in the role of Vincent and does a fantastic job as well. Now, Bronson Pinchot. He's, Serge in the Beverly Hills Cop movies. He's going to be in the new one. He was also in the 80s sitcom Perfect Strangers. He's in this movie, and he's in a movie called High Spirited. I've never seen the movie, but I remember seeing scenes of it on HBO when I was younger, when I was a kid. And I remember seeing the cover of the VHS, which happens to be like a bed, and he's like hovering over the bed. But this was a really good role for him. I've never really seen him. I think he was in Blame It on the Bellboy. Blame It on the Bellboy as well. But I've never really seen him get to these heights as an actor. And I'm really surprised that he wasn't giving any more bigger roles, or at least supporting roles, after this one. He did like The Surreal Life, one of those kind of shows. The one that aired on VH1 in the early 2000s. He was on that for a while. You got Sam Jackson. He's in just a small part. He's probably in 2 or 3 parts. But, his lines of dialogue are very memorable. And he's, I don't want to say he's a standout character. But for the, he's on the screen maybe 2 minutes. And it's a great job. Michael Rappaport. He's actually on a show now on Netflix. I can't remember what it's called. But it's on there. And he's been in quite a few things. Not Kiss the Girls. Beautiful Girls. He was in that. Mighty Aphrodite. He was in that. And he has shown up. He was in the Eddie Murphy movie Metro. So he's been in a couple movies. And his career has lasted quite a long while. And he has a great supporting role as Dick Ritchie. And I think this is probably his best role. James Gandolfini of The Sopranos. This was before The Sopranos. He does a fantastic job as like a mobster. And he gets into a brutal, but it is the most brutal scene of the entire film. It's him and Patricia Arquette. And it's tough to watch. But it's realistic and it's a great job in both of their parts. Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore do a fantastic job, a good job as their characters. Detective Nikki Dimes and Detective Cody Nicholson. So that rounds out the cast. That's one of the largest casts we've had since we've been doing the show. So my favorite scene or least favorite scene. There are so many good scenes in this movie. Now, I'll veer away from the Sicilian scene because that one is such a fantastic scene. But it's this scene I'm going to talk about is a scene, but it upsets me in a way because of the way it happens. So Elliot is the actor that Dick Ritchie contacts in order to try to sell the drugs. And Elliot happens to be friends with the producer, Lee Donowitz, who is played by Saul Rubinek. And so he's calling on the phone, and Elliot's driving along, and he has a female passenger. And the female passenger, they get pulled over because Elliot's speeding through the Hollywood Hills. So as Elliot's doing that, sirens behind him, he gets pulled over, and he happens to have the bag of drugs that he had gotten from Clarence to give to Lee. And he's like, just put it in your purse. Put it away. The cops won't search you. You didn't do anything wrong. So as he is trying to give her the drugs to put away, she hits his hand, and the drugs pop open and go all over his face. So therefore, he is forced to wear a wire to try to get Lee to admit that he's going to buy these drugs, therefore giving Elliot immunity and him not being charged with a crime. Does that make sense if you've not seen the movie? But that scene between Elliot and the girl in the car is a really good scene. Not my favorite scene of the movie, but it's a standout scene because all he wants her to do, just put this away. Nothing's going to happen. I was speeding. However, had he not been so nervous, and as you learn throughout the movie, Elliot is a nervous, they have their meet and greet basically with Clarence at an amusement park. So, that's a really good scene. Obviously the Sicilian scene is a really great scene. And there is a really good scene between, it's kind of when Dick Ritchie is there's one scene where he's going in and auditioning for a role on the new T.J. Hooker with William Shatner, but it's the new one. So he goes in, does his little audition, which lasts, 5 or 6 minutes. The audition lasts, 20 or 30 seconds. Later on in the film, he gets a call. He gets the part. Everyone's excited about going off and selling the drugs and stuff. And then he doesn't tell Clarence. And then he talks to himself. I got the job. I got the part. It's a nice little subtle scene. As many, many others are in the movie as well. And I'm just giving you some that you might not originally think about. Score, music. We've been listening to a lot of the score and the music throughout the show. Here's another one. The way I first came to know about this movie is I think it accidentally recorded when I was recording a movie on HBO. Or I may have recorded on purpose. But this song, Chris Isaak, Two Hearts.
The night seems so dark around you. You won't say a word. And wonder why no one's found you waiting for love. Praying for love again.
It's a nice little chipper song. Sing along if you know. Love is a heavy weight. He's going to tell you.
Love's a heavy weight. Give it to me.
But yeah, I think the soundtrack, it's a really good soundtrack. It's not the best soundtrack that we have had on the show. That would probably, I don't know, that would maybe go to Killing Zoe or Infinity Pool. Maybe even Jacob's Ladder. But we do have, often when we do movies on here, the score, Punch Drunk Love. That was an amazing score as well. So there's some tough competition when we have done a lot of the score for the films that we've done. I mean, this is the opening little xylophone right here. Originality, I think this movie is a pretty original movie. The movie the movie itself, the story itself, trying to get rid of drugs that you come upon, that might not be original in itself, but the way in which it's told from A to B to C to D is what makes it original. The characters is what makes it original, not exactly the story, but the way the characters move the story forward. And I think that's the original part. The dialogue, obviously, but the characters. Clarence, spoiler alert, but Clarence was originally supposed to die in the movie. Even Quentin Tarantino had said that was the way it was supposed to be. But after he saw the movie, he was like, no, Tony Scott made the right decision and changed it and had Clarence live. Because you fall in love with these characters. That's why this is a top-notch cast. There's not a bad apple amongst them. And this is why I would recommend this movie. The poster, there's a couple of different ones. And, you can check them out. You can just Google the True Romance poster. Several of them have the characters. There's a lot of fan art ones out there that'll really stand out. And you can find some from different countries around the world that are really cool too. But yeah, I think it's an eye catcher. I would stop and say, I wonder what this movie is about. And it's kind of a play on the pulp comics from, the 30s and 40s, like a true romance comic. And would I recommend this film? Yes or no? Now, I think that you would know, especially by this point, that, I've talked this film up quite a bit. I think it is a fantastic film. It is a violent film, so do go into it knowing that. The first act, you might not know what you're getting into if you've never heard of it before, or if you've never seen it, or if you're just going by name alone. Because the first act, probably the first 20 minutes or so, you might just think this is a overcoming her being, a call girl type thing. But there's so much more to that, because that's not even in the realm of Clarence's worries. He loves Alabama. She loves him. And love is taking them through this journey so they can be together and live happily ever after. With their young son that they later have named Elvis. So yeah, I would definitely, if you want some great performances, if you want some early 90s violent flair, written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Tony Scott. I mean, you've heard the movies that he's made. I mean, let me read some of them again. Tony Scott has directed Top Gun with Tom Cruise, Val Kilmer, Beverly Hills Cop with Eddie Murphy, Revenge with Kevin Costner, Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise again, The Last Boy Scout, which is one of Bruce Willis's most underrated movies. You've also got Damon Wayans there. True Romance. You've got Crimson Tide with Denzel. The Fan, Robert De Niro and Wesley. Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman. Spy Game with Brad Pitt and Robert Redford. You've got Man on Fire with Denzel again, and I think a young Dakota Fanning, maybe? Dakota Fanning. Domino. I've only seen Domino once. It's got Keira Knightley and Mickey York on it. And I remember liking it upon release. I haven't seen it since. It came out in 2005, so wow. 19 years ago. Deja Vu with also Denzel and Val Kilmer. The Taking of Film or Film 1, 2, 3 with Denzel and Chris Pine, John Travolta, and Unstoppable with Denzel and Chris Pine. So he's worked with Denzel a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And sadly, Tony Scott is no longer with us. In 2010 or 11, he took his own life. So that should have been something I said earlier, because I don't want to end on a sad note. But, you know, you probably have had some time to get over it. It's been 14 years now. But yeah, go check out A True Romance. I think it's about, you know, an hour and 42 minutes, I think. And I think it's an hour and 42 minutes that goes by quickly. You'll be entertained. And some of the best actors and actresses do some of their best work in this film. So, yeah, thanks for checking out Real Talk. Be sure to go to all of our social media pages. That is the YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. The Other People's Show. Next week, I'm not sure what I'm going to be diving into. I know we're going to be doing the Mothman Prophecies soon. But see, we did 34 episodes of Real Talk in 2023. So I do want to top that in 2024. So some of the movies that may be on the horizon are Blue Velvet, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Eyes Wide Shut, Black Swan, Never Been Kissed. You know, I could have done Groundhog Day today. I thought about that. I do have on my notes written Groundhog Day, February 2nd. So that I can't do that one now. Heather's, Scream, Clue, Gremlins, 12 Monkeys, Cape Fear, Garden State, American Psycho, The Last Boy Scout, Fargo. The list goes on and on and on. I watch a movie about every night. So you just throw a movie at me, we'll do it on the show. So stay tuned for The Other People. That's getting ready to come up right now in just a few moments on 92.5 WLSD. And thanks for tuning in.
In my life, I've seen such things that I wish I had